Hi, everyone. The notes for Module 6 are really well laid out. So I'm going to go over the different types of sampling methods, but there's some examples at the end that I'm just going to let you go ahead and read through. But I will do an extra video for the homework since that's where a lot of the practice is going to come in. Okay. So this is talking about if we want to do a statistical study, how do you choose the people to do that with? And next week, I'm going to introduce the first project, and you will be needing to find a sample of people to do a survey on. So this is going to be really important. And I think there's some questions on the first test that have to do with being able to name the different types of sampling techniques. Okay. So there are two things you always must keep in mind when you're selecting a sample. It must be representative, and I'll highlight just so you guys can see where I am in the notes. It must be representative of the population, and any potential bias should be minimized. Okay. So this case study, which will come back when you're reading farther along on your own, suppose you want to determine the musical preferences of all students at your university based on a sample of students. Here are some examples of the many possible ways to pursue this problem. So A says, post a music lover survey on a university internet bulletin board asking students to vote for their favorite type of music. This is called a volunteer sample. Okay, so this is almost always guaranteed to be biased. Often only people with a strong opinion will respond. In this case, people who like music. So you see this a lot in the news when kind of people are making up their own little surveys. It's usually only people who are interested in what's happening that are going to take that survey, and it's going to be biased. Okay, there's just no getting around that. Part B says, stand outside the student union across from the Fine Arts Building and ask students passing by to respond to your question about musical preference. This is called convenience sampling because you are right there. This also has a high chance of bias because people who are walking by the Fine Arts Building are people who are probably art majors or taking art or interested in art. Okay. Individuals, what this says is individuals with certain characteristics may be favored over others. In this case, the proximity to the Fine Arts Building might result in a disproportionate number of students favoring classical music, right? Because they're going to be into that sort of stuff. Part C, obtain a student directory with email addresses of all the university students and send the music poll to every 50th name on the list. This is called systematic sampling because there's obviously a system happening. It has a lower chance of bias. You could still have bias. It says a systematic sample would not allow for sibling students to be selected because of having the same last name. So if I choose somebody with the last name Binkley, like my last name, and the next person is 50 people down from me, it's probably not going to be another Binkley, right? I've actually never met another Binkley. So it's talking about sibling, and depending on how something is in order, it could be maybe somebody all of the same ages are together, so you're not going to get people the same age. You don't know what it's going to look like in that database. Obtain a student directory with email addresses of all the university students and send your music poll to a simple random sample. Remember that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to highlight that. This is what you're going to always want to try to do, is get a simple random sample of students. It's kind of like picking names out of a hat. There are a lot for your project, maybe not for this first one, but definitely for the second one. A simple random number generator, I think, is the easiest way, either on your calculator or on the computer, to do a simple random sample, unless you want to cut up a bunch of people's names and put them in a hat. But I will tell you, anytime you have, and I'm doing air quotes here, even though you can't see me, a random number generator, any sort of random generator that is actually done by a computer or by a calculator is not really random. It's random enough because it's random to the point where people aren't going to know the difference. But just the fact that somebody had to write a program to find random numbers means that it's not random. Okay, so at the end of the day, a computer generated random number is not actually a random number. Putting everybody's name into a hat, shaking it up, that will give you a random number. So this will not have bias as long as everyone responds. If a large part of the sample does not respond, the bias may be created from non-response. That's important. I think that's on the first test also. Okay, similar to the volunteer sample. All right, so different types of sampling plans. So these are the 4 major ways, and these are what you are going to need to know also for the test. Simple random sampling, the simplest probability sampling plan. It is equivalent to selecting names out of a hat, just what I was talking about. Each individual has the same chance of being selected. Okay. Just if you're actually, I'm going to say like pulling names out of a hat, I feel like if there is, everything needs to be the same for each name. If some names are being written on heavier paper, those may fall to the bottom. So I would say probably there are different ways that wouldn't be perfect, but it is the best way to get a good sample. The systematic sampling, which is like every CAPE that's using it for a variable, every X individual in the population, every 50th, every third, whatever that looks like to you. Cluster sampling. This sampling technique is used when our population is naturally divided into groups. So think about Denver Public Schools. We are naturally divided into a bunch of different schools. We randomly pick several groups within a collection of group and take every member of the group to be part of that sample. So what it's saying is like they would randomly pick 5 schools and every single person in that school would be part of the sample. Okay? But not to be confused with this next one, but we're going to use the same kind of idea. Stratified sampling, it's used when the population is naturally divided into subpopulations, which we call stratum. We randomly select a few members from every group. So in the clustered sampling using DPS, the clustered one, you took several schools randomly and surveyed every single person at that school. What that would look like with stratified sampling is that you would take several people randomly from every school, okay? And then after this, I'm just going to ask you, I don't want to just read this to you and it feels weird not being in a class. This is written out really well. I'm going to ask you to please read through the examples and case studies in the next couple of pages here. Print it out, keep it with you so that you can use it when you're answering questions. I'm going to stop this video, but I am going to do some practice problems from the homework for Module 6, which I think would be a better use of our time than me just reading the rest of these notes to you.